know. Brian is starting with the Russian economy today. It's proved, well, surprisingly resilient, hasn't it, despite Western sanctions?
It has, Stuart. Many of the sanctions, of course, could take years to be fully felt, but Russia has managed to weather them much better than Europe or the U.S. might have hoped. Now, there are a few reasons for that. One is that the very war effort that triggered those sanctions has forced a massive outlay of public money into the defense and industrial sectors. The Kremlin planning $119 billion in military spending this year. That's a 90% increase over 2021 and fully 30% of the federal budget for Russia. The war has had an immense human cost, of course, but it has been a job creator in the country, with Russia's military industrial production running at full capacity. Some 500,000 new jobs have been created in the sector there.
And meanwhile, Brian, it also looks as though Moscow's kind of finding ways to blunt the effects of sanctions on the Russian oil and gas sector.
It has indeed, Stuart. Import bans and forced price caps have definitely stung the Russian energy sector. Prior to the war, Russia sent some 45% of its oil exports to Europe. That has now fallen to roughly 5%. Last year saw oil and gas revenues fall by nearly a quarter to just $99 billion on the year. Last month, February, though, saw energy revenues jump by more than 80% over 2023's figure. That, of course, largely due, though, to Moscow calculating oil taxes based on a higher price than its oil firms are actually getting due to the price caps put in place by Europe and the U.S. Still, oil companies are finding ways around sanctions, from shadow tanker fleets to non-Western customers. It's part of a wider response by the Russian economy overall. Vedika Bahel takes a closer look in this report.
It's the most sanctioned country in the world, but despite an expensive war and bruising boycotts, the Russian economy has bent but hasn't broken. Since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, Moscow has been slammed with multiple rounds of sanctions by the West. But President Putin played up that fact in his national address, saying that with 3.6% growth in GDP last year, Russia actually expanded faster than any of the nations that sanctioned it.
Last year, the Russian economy grew at a rate higher than the world's. In terms of this indicator, we are ahead not only of the leading countries of the European Union, but also of all the states of the so-called G7.
Last month, however, the country's year-on-year inflation rate soared to 7.7%, nearly double the 4% target set by Russia's central bank. Unemployment is low at 2.9%, and with thousands who have died or are fighting in the war effort, there's an increased labour shortage. The ruble also tumbled, making imports more expensive, resulting in high prices for residents.
Everything has become more expensive, our transport, goods and products.
According to Putin, Russia is successfully transitioning away from Western markets. Global brands like McDonald's and KFC may have disappeared, though are often reincarnated by local equivalents. He also argues new trading relationships are being forged. To remedy its deficit with the West, Moscow has turned to other energy buyers, including China and India, and about 70% of its imports now come from Beijing.
And we're going to wrap up business with a check on the day's trading action. Now, another big week for central bank decisions, with the U.S. Federal Reserve kicking off its next open market committee on Tuesday. Most analysts expecting the Fed to hold rates steady at 5.25% to 5.5%. The Bank of Japan widely predicted to exit its long-running negative interest rate policy this week, as Japanese wages finally start to rise after years of stagnation. The Nikkei in Tokyo is up. Nissan and Honda each gaining several percent on news that the two rival automakers are exploring a strategic partnership on electric vehicles and AI. Here in Europe, the Bank of England also expected to hold rates steady. Major indexes opened with some tentative gains, and I will say, Stuart, they're all looking forward basically to this Federal Reserve meeting this week. Everyone thinks that the Fed is going to hold rates steady, but the question is, will they signal that they're going to hold rates steady for longer? Everyone's been waiting for rate cuts from the Fed, and they might be waiting just a few months more as the inflation data keeps coming in higher than expected.
Okay, we shall wait and see. Brian, thank you very much.